Hello again, and welcome back to our Naruto walkthrough. Before moving on to our next quest, we are going to have one more sort of tutorial. The reason is, as I was browsing some Naruto forums on the internet, I realized that many readers didn't really catch the dynamics between Akatsuki leaders competing for the Jūbi. For example, a frequently asked question was, why didn't Obito capture Naruto earlier in the novel when it would have been easy? Now that's a problem, because most of the hidden plots we are going to see in this walkthrough will revolve around Akatsuki leaders competing for the Jūbi. So if we are not solid on the basics, it will be difficult to follow the plots. That's why we are going to answer this question and have a little remedial class today. Now if this is already obvious to you, then I suggest you just skip the video and I'll see you in the next one. Otherwise, let's get started. The most common goal shared by relevant characters in Naruto is getting the Jūbi. Can you name all the characters who are competing for the Jūbi's chakra? It's quite a big list. Let's start with the obvious. We have Nagato and Obito, the two official leaders of Akatsuki. A bit higher in the food chain, we have Madara. Then we have a couple of outsiders, Orochimaru, who eventually gets replaced by Kabuto. Next we have the Jūbi itself. It might sound a bit weird to say the Jūbi wants the Jūbi, but it will make sense later on in the walkthrough. Finally we have Zetsu, and of course we have everyone's favorite character, Samehada. If she isn't your favorite character yet, I'm quite confident she will be by the time we are done with this series. The important point here is, those characters can be allies to some extent, for example in order to protect themselves from the main villages. But they are mostly competitors, because there is only one Jūbi, so only one of them can succeed. For example, if let's say Obito gets the Jūbi, then it means Madara does not. So really, at the end of the day, those guys are actually enemies. Now, all these characters start the game with a few assets and handicaps. Just for the sake of the exercise, let us analyze quickly the position of a couple of these characters. Let's take Nagato for example. What is Nagato's best asset? Nagato's main asset is that he starts the game with a Rinnegan. That's a huge advantage because, aside from making Nagato a powerhouse, the Rinnegan means that if the Jūbi gets revived now, then Nagato is the one who will get it, because thanks to the Rinnegan, he controls the Gedo Mazo, and he would be the one able to absorb the Jūbi. That's huge. But Nagato has a couple of handicaps as well. Nagato's main weakness is knowledge. He doesn't know much about his competitors, whereas his competitors know a lot about him. He doesn't know much about the Jūbi. He doesn't exactly know what's going to happen when the Jūbi is getting revived. And he doesn't even know that much about his own powers, notably the Rinnegan. Most of what Nagato knows was told to him by Obito, who is of course not a reliable source, since Obito is a competitor. Nagato also lacks information network. The idea is, he is the leader of his village, but Amegakure is a small village, and out of it, Nagato is quite isolated. Most of the information he can get transits through Akatsuki, notably through Zetsu, who is of course not loyal to him. So Nagato is playing with a lot of fog of war. Let us quickly have the same analysis for Zetsu. What are Zetsu's main assets? Zetsu's assets are basically the opposite of Nagato's. First, knowledge asymmetry. Zetsu knows about everything about his competitors, except for Samehada, whereas his competitors know very little about him. They don't even know what he is. Additionally, as we said earlier, most information on the outside world in Akatsuki transits through Zetsu, who is both a spy and the information network. So Zetsu gets to decide who will get what information. Controlling information is a huge asset, especially for a character as intelligent as Zetsu. But much like Nagato, Zetsu has handicaps as well. Can you list them? Zetsu's first handicap is he is not a human, he's not actually a ninja, so he cannot control the Rinnegan himself, he cannot summon the Jūbi by himself, etc. He's going to have to rely on manipulation to get what he wants. Speaking of what he wants, that's his second weakness. He has a specific win condition. For Nagato, for example, it's simple. Nagato just needs to summon and absorb the Jūbi, and that's it. Zetsu, he needs a bit more setup, because his goal is to revive Kaguya. For that, the Jūbi needs to be absorbed by Madara specifically, and Zetsu needs to be physically present with a powerful body, and he needs to get a chance to backstab Madara. It's a more convoluted win condition. We will see those characters' specific win conditions in more details when we get to their own plots. For now, let us continue with the remedial class. The question we started with was, why didn't Obito capture Naruto early in the novel? For example, after Orochimaru attacked Konoha, Konoha was in shambles, Naruto was vulnerable, so why didn't Obito capture him at this point? Well, we have the answer now. It's because Nagato still had the Rinnegan. So capturing Naruto this early would have been completely stupid, because if you trigger the endgame, that is, the Jūbi's revival, that early in the story, you're just giving the win to Nagato. Nagato gets the Jūbi, Obito dies, end of the story. That's obviously not what Obito wanted. Obito wants the Jūbi for himself. Now we may be wondering, if Nagato having the Rinnegan is such a problem for Obito, then why didn't Obito just murder him even earlier in the story, back when Nagato still wasn't very proficient with his powers? Well, it wouldn't have been that simple, and one of the problems here is Zetsu. Officially, Obito is still supposed to be following Madara's plan. The plan is, Obito is to groom Nagato into reviving Madara with Rinne Tensei, so that Madara can then take the Rinnegan back and get the Jūbi. Of course, Obito never had any intention of reviving Madara. Obito wants the Jūbi for himself, not for Madara. But as far as Obito knows, Zetsu is Madara's will. So, if Obito shows that he is actually betraying Madara, then Zetsu is going to turn against him. Typically, if Obito were to try to murder Nagato, then Zetsu would immediately realize what is going on, and he would side with Nagato against Obito. So killing Nagato wouldn't be that easy. Now, is it such a big problem for Obito if Zetsu sides against him? After all, as far as Obito knows, Zetsu isn't that much of a fighter. Well, short answer is, yes, it is a problem. Please consider the following. First, a good part of Obito's body is actually made of Zetsu. Now, how would Obito's Zetsu body react if Obito were to fight against Zetsu? It's difficult to say, but there is a risk Zetsu would be able to hijack his Zetsu body. Next, there is the seal Madara used on Obito's heart. How is Obito's own heart going to react with Madara's seal if Obito tries to fight Madara's will? Again, difficult to say, but it's risky. Then there is the Rinnegan. Everything Obito knows about the Rinnegan was taught by Madara. Now, Madara isn't stupid. He knows that Obito is going to want to betray him if he gets a chance. So, what is the likelihood that there is some important knowledge Madara kept from Obito, just in case Obito did try to murder Nagato? So, all in all, Obito would be fighting against Nagato and Conan themselves, plus Zetsu, plus half of his own body, plus his own heart, all of that with actually limited knowledge on Nagato's abilities. These odds are terrible for Obito. Unless he's completely desperate and has absolutely no other solution, attacking Nagato would be a suicide move. This is why Obito had to pretend he was still loyal to Madara, so he couldn't attack Nagato. Now you may ask, aren't we making lots of things up? For example, is there any evidence that Zetsu would actually be able to turn Obito's Zetsu body against him? Well, there is not, and it absolutely does not matter. The idea here is Obito is performing a risk calculation. The definition of a risk is likelihood and impact of the risk. You factor the two to calculate the risk, and then you calculate how much it would cost you to prevent the risk. For example, would it cost you the loss of a big opportunity? And that is how you decide to play around the risk. Obito is making those calculations based on his knowledge. There are two big categories of knowledge for Obito, that is, what he knows and what he does not know. The interesting category is in between, what Obito knows he does not know. And here, Obito knows there is a lot he does not know, for example, about Zetsu's abilities. So he is calculating his risk based on knowledge he knows he does not have. The most lethal kind of knowledge, by the way, is what you think you know but you actually don't. Typical example in Naruto would be Madara thinks he knows what Zetsu is, but he actually does not, and it's going to be fatal. But let's get back on topic. The point I want to drive home here is that when we study the decision making of a character, we need to do it from the specific perspective of that character, keeping in mind what this character knows and does not know. Here, for example, what Zetsu actually would have done, or what Zetsu could have done, is irrelevant. What we're interested in today is what Obito thinks Zetsu would have done. A funny example with Zetsu is, as we just saw, one of the reasons why Obito does not want to attack Nagato directly is that he thinks Zetsu would side against him. But on the other hand, one of the reasons why Nagato does not want to attack Obito directly is that he thinks Zetsu would side with Obito. And again, who Zetsu actually would side with is irrelevant in the context of this conversation. So both Nagato and Obito fear Zetsu. It's not a contradiction. Anyway, what was Obito's plan then? As we saw, he cannot trigger the Jūbi's revival too early because Nagato has a Rinnegan, and he cannot attack Nagato directly. So what is the plan? The first step in Obito's plan is something we will see many characters do in this workflow. That is, delaying, buying time. If the position is not winning for you yet, you just delay the endgame, you delay the Jūbi's revival, until you can orchestrate a better position for yourself. Here, one of Obito's main excuses to buy time is Itachi. Itachi was a convenient excuse for Obito. He said he couldn't attack Konoha because of the deal with Itachi, so he had to delay Naruto's capture. And of course, the excuse is all the more believable because Itachi might be the strongest man in the world at this point, so it is quite believable that Obito would not want to cross him. So, buying time is fine, but you have to do something with your time. What is Obito planning? Obito is planning to send Nagato to his death, and for that he is counting on Konoha, specifically on Naruto. Just as we saw with Hiruzen in a previous episode, Naruto on paper should become one of the strongest men in the world. He's a Kyubi Jinchuriki, he's a 4th Hokage son, etc. So Obito is buying time for Naruto to get stronger. Specifically, he's buying time for Naruto to get strong enough to challenge pain, and then he can send Nagato to his death by having him attack Konoha. Nagato is especially likely to make a mistake and die in Konoha because he has a personal grudge against them. And indeed, that's exactly what is going to happen. Nagato's death will be a bit more complex than that, as we will see later in the series. It will actually involve a couple of hidden plots. But for the moment, what matters is, Nagato does die, Obito did not even need to do anything to finish him off, so now Obito can play stupid and pretend he's really sorry about Nagato's death. Nagato's death was unforeseen, it's a disaster, and now poor Obito is going to be forced to go to Plan B and take the Rinnegan for himself. Yeah, of course, Plan B was Plan A from the start. And here you can see Zetsu acting as if he didn't know Obito intentionally sent Nagato to his death. Of course, Zetsu is not stupid, he knows exactly what Obito has been doing. The reason he's playing along is that he has a plan of his own, and Nagato's death was actually fortunate for him as well. This concludes our remedial class. Hopefully we managed to clear up the dynamics between Akatsuki leaders and their decision-making in the competition for the Jūbi. Now that everyone is on board, we are ready to start our first non-tutorial quest in the next episode.